this brain of theirs, to change the system of its localization. That is to say, she gradually dispersed the localization of this organ, which had had its concentration in one place in them, into small localizations over the whole of their common presence, but chiefly in the region of what is called the pit of the stomach. The totality of these small localizations in this region they themselves at the present time call the solar plexus, or the complex of the nodes of the sympathetic nervous system. And in those nervous nodes scattered over the whole of the planetary body, there are accumulated at the present time all the results obtained from the affirming and denying manifestations of their head brain and spinal marrow. And these results, having become fixed in these nervous nodes scattered over the whole of their common presence, are later also such a neutralizing principle in the further process of affirmation and denial between the head brain and the spinal marrow, just as the totality of everything arising in the megalocosmos is the neutralizing force in the process of the affirmation of the protocosmos and the various shades of denials of all the newly arisen suns. And so, the three-brained beings of the planet Earth are not only, as we also are, apparatuses for the transformation of the cosmic substances required for the most great Trogoauto-egocrat, with qualities of all the three forces of the fundamental common cosmic Triamazikando, but also themselves absorbing these substances for transformation from three different sources of independent arisings, have all the possibilities of assimilating, besides the substances necessary for the maintenance of their own existence, also those substances which go for the coating and perfecting of their own higher being bodies. In this manner, those three sourced substances entering their common presences for transformation are, just as for us, a threefold kind of being food. That is to say, those substances which, on the path of their returning evolutionary ascent from the sacred Ashagi Protoihari, i.e., from the last stop-ender of the fundamental sacred Heptaparapashanach, toward the most holy protocosmos, were transmitted with the aid of their own planet itself into definite higher corresponding surplanetary formations, and enter into them for further transformation as their first being food, which is their ordinary food and drink. But those second-sourced substances, which, being obtained from the transformation of their own sun, and of all the outer planets of their own solar system, and which entered the atmosphere of their planet through the radiations of the latter, enter into them again, just as into us, also for further evolutionary transformation as the second being food, which is their, as they there say, air, by which they breathe. And these substances in their air just serve for the coating and maintenance of the existence of their second being bodies. And finally, the first sourced substances, which for them as well as for us are a third kind of being food, serve both for the coating and for the perfecting of the higher being body itself. Well then, it was in relation to those sacred cosmic substances that those sorrowful results occurred among your unfortunate favorites, which flowed and still continue to flow from all the abnormalities established by them themselves in the ordinary process of their being existence. Although the substances also of this higher being food continue to enter into them also until now, yet they enter particularly into the beings of the present time, already only spontaneously, quite without the participation of their cognized intention. and only as much as is required for the transformations proceeding through them necessary for the purposes of the common cosmic trogo-autoegocratic harmony, and for the automatic continuation of their species demanded by nature. When the abnormal conditions of ordinary being existence were finally fixed there, in consequence of which there appeared from their essence both the instinctive and the intentional striving for perfecting, there not only disappeared in them the need of conscious absorption of cosmic substances, but even also the very knowledge and understanding of the existence and significance of higher being foods. At the present time there, your favorites already know only of one, the first being food. And they know about that only because in the first place, even without their wish, they could not help knowing about it. And secondly, the process of its use there has already become for them also a vice, and occupies an equal rightful place alongside other of their weaknesses, which were gradually crystallized in them as consequences of the properties of the maleficent, for them, organ kundabuffer. Up to this time, not one of them has yet even become aware that in this first being food there are substances necessary almost exclusively only for the maintenance of the existence of their coarse planetary body alone, which is a denying source, and that this first being food can give almost nothing for the other higher parts of their presence. As for those higher cosmic substances, of which a certain quantity must, as I've already said, necessarily be transformed through them for the continuation of their species, and for the maintenance of the general harmony of the common cosmic ensemble-azar, your favorites at the present time have no need at all to trouble their inner god self-calming about it, since this is already done in them, as I've already said, quite spontaneously without the participation of their own cognized intention. It is interesting, however, to notice that in the beginning, namely soon after the destruction of the functioning of the organ kundabuffer in the three-brained beings breeding on this planet of yours, they also became aware of these two higher being foods, and then began to use them with cognized intention. And certain beings of the continent Atlantis, of its latest period, even began to consider these same processes of the absorption of these higher being foods as the chief aim of their existence. The beings of the continent Atlantis then called the second being food Amarlus, which meant help for the moon. And they called the third being food the sacred Amarhutan, and this last word then signified for them help for God. Concerning the absence in the psyche of your favorites of a cognized need of absorbing these higher sacred cosmic substances, I wish also to draw your attention to one very important for them, sorrowful consequence flowing from this. And namely, in view of the fact that in them, together with the cessation of the intentional absorption of these definite cosmic substances necessary for the arising and existence of higher being parts, there disappeared from their common presences not only the striving itself for perfection, but also the possibility of what is called intentional contemplativeness, which is just the principal factor for the assimilation of those sacred cosmic substances. Then, from that time on, in order to guarantee that the required quantity of those substances might enter into them and be assimilated, nature gradually had to adapt herself to arrange that for each of them, in the course of their whole process of existence, such unexpectednesses should occur already by themselves, as are not at all proper to occur to any three-brained being of our great megalocosmos.